In Saudi Arabia, the number of executions taking place has almost doubled, according to new research, despite promises of reform by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. A report by the campaign group Reprieve, shared exclusively with the BBC and before publication, also found that the death penalty has been routinely used for non-lethal offences in defiance of international norms. The UN Human Rights Office told the BBC it was deeply concerned about the trend, as Caroline Hawley now explains.
These are just a fraction of the hundreds of people put to death by the Saudi state over the past few years. Executions carried out with no warning given to their families, no chance for a last goodbye. Last year, the biggest mass execution in modern Saudi history, 81 in a single day, among them Mustafa al-Khayat. Here he is with his nephew Ahmad. And here is Ahmad now with his father and brother, refugees in Germany. Yasser fled Saudi Arabia with his family after his brother's arrest in 2014. Yasser played us the final words his family ever heard from him, a phone call to his mother from jail. When he'd first visited him, he said Mustafa could barely stand from torture. Yasser says he was still trying to appeal when he and dozens of others were executed for their part in anti-government protests, accused of terrorism.
Not only did they take their lives, they then intentionally maligned them, accused them of things they've not done, and they kept their bodies. We don't know whether they were given a decent burial. It's been a tragedy for the families.
4 days after Mustafa was executed, Boris Johnson arrived in Saudi Arabia and met the Crown Prince, hoping to persuade him to pump more oil to replace Russian imports. Mohammed bin Salman, billed as a moderniser, but for many a morally problematic ally. Salman al-Audi is a prominent cleric who's called for political reform, with millions of followers online. Painted as an extremist, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for him. His son now has asylum in the US.
My father's arrest is really about the silencing of critics, silencing of those who can mobilize the masses, who can make a change, who can dissent.
The legal charity Reprieve has been cataloguing a rising trend of executions.
Saudi Arabia has a regime of secrecy around the death penalty. So you have people who were arrested, tried, sentenced to death and then executed in secret.
The Saudi embassy in London gave us a statement which didn't address concerns about how the country uses the death penalty, but said, "We understand that there are other countries that have different judicial systems and different views about appropriate penalties. And as we respect their right to determine their own laws and customs, we hope that others will respect our sovereign right to follow our own judicial and legislative choices." These men on death row were all tortured into making confessions, according to human rights groups. One, a child at the time of his arrest. For them and their families, the fear that any day could be their last.